In this part 1 video of Movie Curator Shelf Club, I'll be putting together the first part of my comedy classics shelf. Hey, it's me, AP, aka Mr. Movie Cheer, and welcome back to another video and another edition of Movie Curator Shelf Club, the show where I put together different types of collections within my movie shelf collection here behind me. It can be different genres, like a specific description of a certain shelf. And today's is a part 1 video, first part of the putting together of the comedy classics shelf. One I'm really looking forward to because this is a bit of a hard one because in all, my collection behind me is more like action, sci-fi, comic book movies, Star Wars stuff. There is a few comedy movies, and I do have some in I have my little folder as well, some in there as well. So I wouldn't say there's a massive amount of comedies in there, but I do like comedy movies. I like a good laugh, I do like me comedies. So putting together a comedy classic shelf is, it's not out of a massive collection, but there's definitely some selection things where I've had to taken a few certain ones out of the shelf because there's only so much shelf space for this comedy classic shelf. But I feel like I've put together a decent shelf worth here, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with you all. So let's get to the shelf and let me share this shelf off with you all. So the first movie going onto the comedy classics shelf is Spinal Tap. One of the most funniest comedies of all time. Spinal Tap, it's basically, if you've never seen it, it's a fictional rock band. I think it's probably based in the 70s, 80s. And basically it's a mockumentary following this band, Spinal Tap, around. This is really the beginning of what we see in mockumentary. I mean, if you like the stuff like The Office now, obviously it's a few years old now, The Office, but I mean, things like The Office were really much inspired by this. This is Spinal Tap, the mockumentary genre. I mean, maybe I'm incorrect, but for me, this is probably the first ever mockumentary film. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there was something before that, but certainly the most well-known mockumentary of all time, I would say for sure. This is Spinal Tap, but really, really funny film. What's interesting as well, I know they've actually announced a sequel for this. Apparently, they're going to be doing a sequel that's coming out next year in 2023. Don't know how I feel about that. I think sometimes classics like this should be left alone, but who knows? It may shock us all. But I feel like this had to be the headline movie of the comedy shelf. It has actually been sitting in my folder for quite some time. It came out of the main collection, and maybe that's a mistake by me, big mistake, because it is a great film and it's one I do enjoy watching a lot. This is Spinal Tap, starts off the comedy classics shelf. Next up, joining the comedy classic shelf is Superbad. Superbad, starring, I always forget the actors' names, Jonah Hill, Michael Cera, Seth Rogen's in this, Bill Hader, you got Mick Lovin, the character Mick Lovin. It's just basically it's a coming of age story, Superbad American comedy, and really brought the likes of Jonah Hill to the main of comedy actors and just actors in general. He's really transitioned more into a serious actor over the years now, but this is a really funny movie. Like I said, the character Mick Lovin's funny, and it's just it's very an American Pie type genre movie, but it's got its own feel. It felt like it must have came out around the same time as movies like Shaun of the Dead and stuff like that, and I must say as well, Shaun of the Dead is not joining the comedy classic shelf. I haven't got that on physical media at the moment. I used to have it, I got rid of it. That won't be on the shelf today. Just a pre-warning, but that should be on the shelf. I'll have to get a copy of that. But it must have came out around the same time, I would say, as Hot Fuzz, Shaun of the Dead, this movie, Superbad. Really, really funny movie. Makes me laugh a lot, and I'm really happy it's joining the comedy classics shelf. The next movie to join the comedy classics shelf is one from one of my other shelves I created on a previous video, and it will be a transfer over from the cinema classic shelf, and that is the movie Dumb and Dumber. The first movie in the Movie Curator Shelf Club series to be transferred from another collection, or traded, whatever you want to call it. I'll say transfer because I'm an English guy, English football. But yeah, making a transfer from the cinema classic shelf. It had, as much as this is a cinema classic for me, I think it's a really like one of the most funniest movies in cinema history. Dumb and Dumber is a comedy classic at heart, and I felt like if I'm putting together this comedy classic shelf, I cannot have Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels' Dumb and Dumber on that shelf. It had to go in there. I'm such a big fan of this movie. I think it's just tons of great scenes in it, tons of great jokes. Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels are just great on screen. I was thinking another side. I think I mentioned a lot like the main scenes in the main popular scenes in the first one, but I think even like little things. Like the little bit of the bubbly when he like shoots out the champagne bottle and it hits the bird. It's just like little things you don't even think like that. And like the burger scene when they're putting the peppers on the guy's burger as well, and they're just laughing and the guy ends up having like a heart attack. And then they give him the rat poison, which is just like they're like, here's your pills, and he looks up and he's just like, "Ugh." It's a great movie, and yeah, it's been transferred from cinema classics. But it is a comedy classic at heart, and I'm glad it is joining the rest of these comedy classics on this shelf. So next up joining the shelf is a British movie starring Steve Coogan, and the movie is The Parole Officer. A really funny British movie, early 2000s, I would say this has got to be now, maybe late 90s. I think it is 2002, this movie, The Parole Officer. Steve Coogan, if you don't know Steve Coogan, I think a lot of people would know the name Alan Partridge. Probably more, I think Steve Coogan is probably more known as Alan Partridge than himself as Steve Coogan. It's kind of weird, but it's this came about probably just after like the boom of like Partridge, I would say, like late 90s. And the feature film, it's a great movie where he's a parole officer and he's got to basically put to this gang of like ex-cons together to retrieve something, and it's a really fun like heist movie. It's silly, it's a good comedy, and I'm glad it's going on the shelf. This is one I used to always I remember as a kid renting this one from the video shop a lot, and it was one I remember renting it several times from the video shop. This one I always thought it was really good. I don't think I ever had it on VHS at home, but I always used to rent it out because it was a really like favorite movie of mine. Then years later, getting it on DVD was really fun to finally get. So yeah, Steve Coogan, The Parole Officer. I'm really pleased that it is going to be going on the not the cinema classics, the comedy classics shelf. The next movie going on the shelf is Zoolander, starring Ben Stiller. Really funny movie. Didn't watch it initially when it came out. This is one I watched years later. And I don't know, something always put me off Zoolander. I don't know, it was like the name, it just sounds really silly, Zoolander. And I never really knew what it was about, but I remember watching it on TV once or something, and just thinking, this movie is really funny. Ben Stiller is great. I like Ben Stiller, Jim Carrey, definitely two of my favourite like comedy actors. And Ben Stiller in Zoolander, he's this male model who's like super stupid. I couldn't even get my words out there. Super stupid, but it's just and then it's like this weird plot line goes on within this story, and then he's just like becomes like this hero, and it's just a really weird story, but it's a really fun story. Zoolander. I like this film. I think it's a really decent film, and yeah, I think it is definitely a comedy classic. The next movie joining the shelf is Will Ferrell in Anchorman, the legend of Ron Burgundy. What an absolutely amazing film. I remember seeing, I think probably on like DVD disc, or probably would have been more DVD discs, like the trailers for Anchorman at the time. When you get like the DVDs where they'd have like 10 trailers at the start, you'd have to like skip through them all. And I remember seeing the trailer for this one on one of those, and the trailer for Anchorman looked really funny. I don't know if it was like a theatrical trailer or whatever, but it was a really great trailer. Really just thought, that's a movie I've got to watch. And finally, maybe like, I think it came out like 2004 around that time, this movie. Basically, I remember getting hold of a copy of it, watching it, and just thinking, this is great. And I think a lot of people like were quoting the movie at the time. You'd hear people like doing impressions, discussing the movie. And yeah, it's just one of those movies that is just really funny, really stupid, just like Dumb and Dumber. It's just got so many. It's just a movie that doesn't take any moment seriously in this movie. Every moment is, even if it comes across as a moment that could be somewhat dangerous. It's a silly moment, like when at the end he's going into like a burr pit. It just, you think maybe, that's going to be quite serious, but no, it's just like they're like fighting birds, and it's just a really fun moment. Like there's a scene where like the chopping off guys' arms and stuff. It's just a crazy fight scene, and again they just make it super funny and super silly. And Anchorman is just a great movie, really good comedy movie. Will Ferrell's ace, and you've got Steve Carell in here. You've got what's his name, Ant-Man guy, Paul Rudd is in there as well. Really great cast, and yeah, really funny movie, Anchorman. So the next movie to join the comedy classic shelf is Kingpin, starring Woody Harrelson, Randy Quaid and Vanessa Angel. This was definitely one of my go-to comedy movies, along with the likes of Dumb and Dumber growing up. Kingpin is basically the story of this guy, Woody Harrelson's character, who's like this really good amateur bowler at 10-pin bowling. And then he has an accident, something happens to him, then you see him years later, he's like this washed up ex-professional 10-pin bowler, and he's lost his hand. Basically, he has a rubber hand now. He lost his hand in a certain event early on in this movie. And then he starts coaching Randy Quaid's character, who's this, I think he's from an Amish community in America. An Amish community, that is it. Sorry, my apologies. Amish community. And obviously they're very strict about, socializing kind of with like the outside world, modern technology. And he takes him on in this adventure to this bowling championships, and it's just a really fun movie. I think it is a Farrelly Brothers movie as well. Farrelly Brothers who did like the Something About Mary, Dumb and Dumber. So it's got good minds behind this movie. It's a really funny film as well. Bill Murray's in there as well. I think Bill Murray is kind of like forgotten in this movie, really. But Bill Murray is kind of like a villainous role in this. He's not like the all-out villain of this movie. There isn't really an all-out villain per se. Well, maybe you could argue that maybe he is actually the villain of the piece. Maybe he is the main villain of this movie, in a way. He's still funny. He's Bill Murray. He's just a funny guy in this as well. But yeah, really great movie, Kingpin. And I'm really pleased again that this is another one joining the comedy classics shelf. The next movie to join the comedy classic shelf is The 40-Year-Old Virgin, starring Steve Carell. And this is a really, really funny movie. Probably came out around the same time as like the Superbad movies, the Anchorman. Steve Carell obviously in Anchorman as well. You've got Paul Rudd, who was also in Anchorman, who's in this movie as well. And I think you've got Seth Rogen. Seth Rogen. I think he's in this movie as well. I always get Jonah Hill, Seth Rogen, all the names muddled up in my head. But basically, the story of this is, Steve Carell's character, he's this 40-year-old guy, he's trying to lose his virginity, and it's just a bunch of funny stories throughout this movie, funny moments, I should say. Steve Carell is brilliant. I love Steve Carell in The Office. I think he's great in this, in that TV show. And in this is just as funny. It's Steve Carell being Steve Carell, just being really silly, really funny guy. He's just got one of those... I think he's very similar to the Jim Carrey, where he can do a lot of like his facial expressions and the way he reacts and stuff. He's very, out there, throwing his like expressions out there, Steve Carell, and he really shows it in this movie. Really funny movie. It's definitely going on the comedy classics shelf. So ending the first part of this comedy classic shelf today, I'm going to end it off with John Candy in a John Hughes film called Uncle Buck. This is a movie that I think is, it's one I didn't really watch much as a kid, because I remember seeing bits of it and as a kid, and it wasn't really for me. And I've watched it in recent years a lot more, and definitely over the last couple of months, and really enjoyed this movie. And I think it is a really funny movie. Basically, the premise of the story is you've got Macaulay Culkin and this other young child actress, I should say. Basically, the mum and dad has to go away, and they get their uncle to mind them for like the week or whatever it is. And there's a teenage girl as well who he has to look after. And the uncle is played by John Candy, Uncle Buck. And he's basically, they don't really know him that well. And he's kind of like this, he doesn't have kids. He's just maybe not suited for looking after kids. He's just like a bit like outlandish, just like he does his own thing, he's his own guy. But it's a really funny movie, Uncle Buck, and it's one I'm pleased to put on the Comedy Classics shelf, because it's one, like I said, it's one more recently that I'm enjoying a lot more now than I used to. But I think, that's the thing with movies. It's good that you can change your opinion on movies and, change what your thoughts are, and, something you may have not liked years ago, you watch in the future and then you'd be like, oh, this is actually a really good movie. Uncle Buck is definitely one for me, and it is ending off the first part of the Comedy Classics shelf in this video today. I'm really pleased about. So that is the first part of the Comedy Classics shelf done now. So I'm looking forward to getting to part 2 and putting together that final part of the shelf. But I think on this shelf, I just look at this and I think like movies like Dumb and Dumber being transferred over from the Cinema Classics shelf, such a great movie. Anchorman is just, I just look at that cast, look at the movie again, just an all-out comedy classic. In the, having the British movie in there as well, in the Parole Officer, really good. More modern, say modern ones, but like Superbad again, another like modern comedy classic in a way. I mean, I say modern now, it's probably getting on for like nearly 20 years old probably, but still a great movie. But yeah, I'm really happy with the way this first part of the shelf has turned out, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to finishing it off in the next part of this video. If you enjoyed this video today, please do give it a like and check out the rest of the movie related content on the channel as well. And let me know your thoughts on the first part of this shelf. Do you think I've done well in selecting these Comedy Classics movies? Do you reckon these are the best comedy movies to go on the Comedy Classics shelf? What would be on your Comedy Classics shelf? Let me know your favourite picks from the collection today. Let me know all your thoughts, ladies and gents. Remember, I got 3 words for you here in the Movie Curator Shelf Club. Control your collection. I'll see you next time.